All right. Well, welcome to Crossplane services backlog grooming. We're basically going over our 0.3 release and kind of getting stuff groomed for that, for refined. We have, a couple major categories here. One is the resource class enhancements. So we're getting default resource classes and strongly typed classes so they can be validated and annotated. But then the major focus of the release is on infrastructure stacks, and then moving those out of tree. We're focusing on providing single region secure connectivity between the Kubernetes clusters and then the managed services that app deployments would connect to, like a Postgres or a Redis, storage buckets, MySQL, that type of thing. So we have a set of work identified. Some of it is for the services, some of it's for stacks, but just for the purpose of kind of orienting everybody really quick. We're going to be making a distinction between app and infrastructure stacks and dealing with kind of the namespace isolation around that, as well as adding in annotation support so that annotations can be overlaid onto CRDs by the stacks manager at install time. And then we'll be moving the infrastructure stacks that are currently in tree in the core Crossplane repo into separate repos, and we'll be upgrading to KubeBuilder 2 in that time frame. And so then in parallel, I'll be working 3 infrastructure stacks, GCP infrastructure stack, an AWS infrastructure stack, and an Azure infrastructure stack, as well as some CLI developer experience tooling around that for being able to build and push stacks, as well as aspirationally init those stacks with scaffolding and so forth. And so then in order to make this easily consumable so that other partners and community members can easily build their own infrastructure stacks, we'll be creating a developer guide that basically walks through a couple scenarios. One, just like adding a controller and CRD to an existing infrastructure stack. So if I want to add something like Stackdriver to the GCP infrastructure stack because I need it as a user of Crossplane, that I can just follow those instructions and do that fairly quickly. And the other scenario we're targeting for that is, hey, I want to create a whole new infrastructure stack for an unsupported cloud, like Alibaba Cloud or Tencent or DigitalOcean, et cetera. Then we also have this portable WordPress app stack that we're creating in this time frame that can be used against all of these infrastructure stacks. And so it'll be using the default resource classes, and then it'll be able to be deployed across any infrastructure stack when the default resource classes are configured appropriately in each of these environments. Then we'll be updating our docs, and then I have to link this one in, but basically providing pipeline examples for Jenkins, GitLab, and like a GitOps flow for both the GCP and the AWS stacks. So that's kind of like the high-level overview of 0.3. So I guess I'll just pause real quick and see if there are any questions, comments, suggestions.
So my only question there is, so it sounds like 6.15 through 6.17 are 3 parallel tasks to develop the stacks. But then do we have any sort of like layout? I mean, it sounds like there are going to be 3 parallel efforts to use KubeBuilder for KubeBuilder 2 for the first time. And then what are we doing to actually, okay, so the 6.12 is actually, can you talk about that a little bit, like how that's going to be done?
Yeah, so Jared, do you want to talk through that?
Yeah, so I actually talked further about this with Muvafak last night, so he could get a start on it because he had finished up his work, or at least a good stopping point on the general managed reconciler that he'd been doing. So he was looking for something next to take on. So we had like a half-an-hour conversation late last night about how to approach this. And so like my gut feel here is that doing it cleanly up front in the main repo is a good approach here to just take it head on, and then we'll be unblocked beyond that. So we'll have consistency beyond that. But basically Movafic is doing the work now to, do a little write-up about, what is the delta between KubeBuilder 2 and KubeBuilder 1, what are some of the risks and what are the steps we need to take to upgrade the current code base to KubeBuilder 2. And then hopefully, from my efforts that I have, and you too, Travad, we've both worked on KubeBuilder 2 projects that, that delta, there's a couple of different ways things are done, but it's not like a massive, rewrite of all the reconcilers. Like the reconcile functions are still the same. So, I hope that in the very near term that Movafic will have a write-up about, the exact steps that will be taken to upgrade the code base, and then also deal with some of the weird things that we do, like the nested CRD hierarchy that we've been maintaining with the fork of the controller tools. But basically doing this in one complete pass through the repo up front, and then we can start pulling things out to separate repos after we have a consistent code base that's using KubeBuilder 2.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Jared. So the main objective, I think, then today is the high-level understanding of this, to walk through each of these draft epics to make sure that we're good with the content for the ones that the services folks will be focused on, and then reviewing the bullet list of kind of features underneath that or sub-issues, and making sure that at least the titles of those make sense to everybody. And then the intention was to have the person or the group kind of owning, one of these major areas like the GCP infrastructure stack, would then, kind of go and decompose that into a set of sub-issues, and then we could meet back in the next grooming session. I think it's set up for tomorrow, and basically review those. And then we have, we're trying to get ready for sprint planning on Monday, and then on an ongoing basis, we just have the groomings every other week. So we'll kind of get, a more refined backlog in place that we won't be kind of, having such a time pressure. So this first one is already done. So if we open that guy up, so that's basically the default resource classes. That's been closed out, so we can kind of skip over that. The next one for resource classes can be validated and annotated. Have you all had a chance to read over this? This is what Nick wrote up. Cool. Okay. So then, are there any questions, comments, or concerns about the write-up for this one?
I guess I have some comments. They're not things that should be changed. I just want to kind of give a bit of a status update. So with the PR that's ready to be merged now, Nick signed off on it last night, but I had a print function left in there. But anyway, it's ready now. And so essentially and this is kind of related to the cube builder and migrating that, all that sort of stuff. The status of the repo after it's merged will have both the existing default class reconciler, which uses the generic resource class, and the new one, but no strongly typed resource classes implemented. So this could be something that kind of like incrementally happens, but it's enabled to happen right now. So as far as tracking the work on it, I might have some, I guess, questions around like the issues. Like for instance, the issue 90, which is like the original strongly typed resource class, is that really enabled? It's kind of like, who's to say, because, for each provider and as we grow to more and more providers, there will continue to be, necessity to implement strongly typed resource classes. So yeah, I think this is something that might be a little bit difficult to define when it's 100% done, but in general, we're most of the way there already. So.
Okay, awesome. Do you have any tweaks that you'd like to make here? And if so, I'm happy to let you do that offline, and then we could circle back tomorrow.
Yeah, and Daniel, it may be entirely appropriate to, because we kind of have a common pattern of implementation facing, where when we're doing a new pattern or going in a new direction, we will kind of enable the generic functionality, and then we'll do one controller updated to use that functionality, and then later on we'll do the rest of them. So it may be entirely reasonable, like at the feature level, to have one feature to, you know, implement the general functionality in a reference controller, and then another issue tracking, you know, migrating or updating the rest of the controllers. That may be an appropriate way to track this.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, that's definitely something we can get done pretty early. In fact, I have a branch right now with it implemented for cloud memory store, so we could definitely do that.
Cool.
And then, you know, this gets to also, you know, this services team here has been this week completing tasks way faster than anybody thought they would. I think Nick is gonna, like, when the next time he's like online and reading all this stuff, his head's gonna explode. But like, it's getting to the point, yeah, in a good way, yeah. Getting to the point that you know, like there's a couple of, like, we have all these extra things we want to do. Like, we want to update the rest of the controllers to use the manage reconciler, the general manage reconciler. We want to add strongly typed resource classes for all of the different resources. You know, things like that, like, while the code base is moving around, first off, upgrading to Kubelet 2, and then you know, migrating to out of tree repositories, like, all of that needs to be phased and orchestrated. And I thought ahead of time that, okay, we'd update Kubelet 2, then we'll move things out, and it could do it kind of slowly. But you guys are moving so fast that now we're kind of getting to a point where a lot of people are freeing up, and they're like, okay, do we continue working on upgrading some of these controllers in types while it's still in tree? Or, you know, is there some parallel effort? Or, you know, is it possible, when, you know, maybe when Mavafik has done his write-up about Kubelet 2 migration, that there is some parallel effort that can be done by more than one person on that? Or is it blocked on a single person implementing it? Or what is the risk around, you know, updating things after Kubelet 2, but before we move out of tree, like updating things in tree? Is there much risk about doing that? And that makes it harder to move out of tree? Like, some of these things need to be thought through a little more. And you guys are working really, really fast and getting to, you know, a point where those figuring out those issues becomes important earlier on than I expected. So it's a good problem to have, but it is still a problem to have.
For sure. I think the main thing that has kind of been like the trade-off in my mind, which there's obviously other things, which I'm sure Muvafik will outline in the write-up, but you know, moving out of tree earlier makes it a little bit easier to work asynchronously on those sorts of things. But you also risk a little bit with consistency, right? If we do it all in tree, then it kind of enforces consistency, but also restricts ability to work. But there might be a way to kind of bring those two things together. So.
Yeah, so I would recommend or invite anybody that has thoughts about that, you know, that it could be a collaborative effort, or, you know, people that have recommendations or ideas on how to make this whole migration, and, you know, move to separate repos to make it smooth. You know, definitely, like, feel free to write down some of those thoughts, or to have some sort of, you know, drive agreement and consensus amongst everybody about how that would best be approached.
So my perspective, I think one of the things that we want to pay attention to is giving some freedom of how to actually things are developed, and then focus more on how the API from those kind of like a stacks or extended things which are kind of like developed are going to be integrated with our service. So for example, if you're having I personally would say I wouldn't be too much worried about, like, if it's used KubeBuilder v2 or v1 or whatever, as long as your extension provides a manager, and then the CRDs, the output needs to be something that we kind of like can accept and then can integrate it. And then I think we should give freedom to, like, how it's actually being developed. and then the reason for that is if you want to consider that people are going to actually go and out of the tree develop this thing for themselves for like Alibaba and everything, I think it will be much more easier for them and then approachable for them to understand what the problem is and then have some freedom how they're going to develop this thing for themselves. That's one way I'm thinking about it.
This is a great conversation. Would it be possible to bring this to the sig-services Slack and have the conversation there? I think I'd maybe move to kind of table this topic for now and kind of favor of moving forward with the rest of the epics.
Sure.
Yes, thank you for that. That's totally fair, Phil. And sorry I send us off on this tangent here, but I appreciate your attention to meeting efficiency. Retrospective success.
All right, cool. So, so that's basically this first one. So Dan, if you do have any other changes, feel free to go in and, drop them in here, and then we can review them tomorrow in our next backlog refinement meeting. Okay, so, and welcome Muvafak. Thanks for joining.
Hello, sorry, I'm a bit late.
Did you win your game, or is it just a pickup game?
Yeah, I'm just all sweat right now.
It's a good feeling though. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were just going over the 0.3, backlog and then kind of making our way down the epics. So we went over the resource classes validated and annotated for strongly. And now we're going to we briefly talked about the stacks manager and moving infrastructure stacks out in the queue builder too. And so we're going to skip over those, I think, for now. Unless anybody wants to talk about the queue builder 2 612, or kind of covered that to a fair degree, but go ahead and move off.
Yeah, actually, we synced with JIRA, then I took over the queue builder 2 migration. So right now I will be working on the what we need to change and is it worth it in general. So I'm working on that one. So we can, if you want, we can talk about it, like the details, but I think I don't have much right now to share.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll just pop this open really briefly then. So this kind of covers what the objective of the epic is, and then the related issues in terms of getting things migrated, and then moving the functionality into separate repos, packaging them as a stack, and publishing them to the registry. So these would get broken out as like separate sub issues, and that's something that whoever is going to be owning this epic would go and do. So as you're kind of digging into that, if you have additional things you want to break out, just go ahead and drop them in here, and then we can meet back tomorrow and kind of review them as a team.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, so then the next one is the GCP infrastructure stack. So this is focusing on single region secure connectivity for between the GKE target clusters and then Cloud SQL database instances, Cloud Memory Store, and buckets. Has everybody had a chance to read through this, and any questions, comments, or suggestions on the epic? I think they did a really great job kind of writing this up. One thing that I've noticed is that we talk about GKE Cloud SQL instance, but we don't talk about the Redis and the buckets. And so those would probably be two additional items that we need to add to what it looks like when we're done. And he did a really nice job of showing like how we could demo this functionality. Probably the most crisp demo script that I've seen so far. So this is definitely something to emulate.
Nick is quite literate.
Yeah. Prolific, I think. So we have the related items down below. So there's the design doc that Nick had put together. We can just pop open briefly. So there's a section in here after you get past the general stuff for GCP, and then down below there's sections for AWS and Azure that are left to be done. And so the other two epics in milestone 0.3, so like Javad for the AWS one, would need kind of an equivalent design doc in this section that just covers kind of the AWS variant of that. And so that's I think largely there, but whoever's going to be taking this epic, we probably want to validate that and make sure that the design doc is good to go with regards, especially to the Redis stuff. So like the cloud memory store and then storage buckets, and making sure that those are going to be able to be securely connected. Brief conversation with Nick said he thought that should be a fairly light lift as far as the delta beyond Cloud SQL secure connectivity, but yeah, something that probably it doesn't go into great detail on just yet. So then defining the new networking types and controllers, that basically maps cleanly to that stuff up there. And then moving the GCP stack controllers to use the general managed reconciler, which it sounds like, Dan, you started work on for the cloud memory store. Were you mentioning that earlier that you poured that over?
For the strongly typed resource classes, the general managed reconciler is the work that MoveOffic just merged. So that's a separate, the managed reconciler and actually the strongly typed and that sort of thing can be handled separately.
Okay. So does the merge of the strongly typed does the merge of the general managed reconciler close 269?
I don't think it's been implemented. Well, has it? I don't know. MoveOffic, you should speak on this.
No, we didn't close the 269. I think we need to talk about it. Let me see that issue.
So this would basically be using whatever ends up getting provided for this, and so 269 would be like this depends on the 269 and whatever gets committed for that pattern or that implementation. And so this is just the work to move the GCP stack controllers, all of them, to start using that. Wanting to validate end-to-end the WordPress stack. And this is the portable WordPress stack that like Suskin is going to be working on, and making sure that that's deployed securely, and then you can access it, using the URL and so forth. So that it's kind of working end-to-end. And so that kind of assumes that portable WordPress stack is using default resource classes by omitting the class reference in the claim that it asserts as part of its controller. So part of the app controller for WordPress stack. And then wanting to get in this new GCP repo a README that makes it easy for new users to get started with the GCP infrastructure stack, and maybe an example or two, just to kind of make it easy for people to adopt. And then we have a API status table that kind of shows, here's all of the CRDs, the versions, and kind of ideally links to the new repos that will be containing them. So that's kind of the initial stab at that, but are there questions, comments, suggestions, and then who's going to be owning this, I guess, as well, because whoever that is, if you want to iterate on this before tomorrow when we meet back, then we could review any changes to this list before we start breaking out sub-issues.
Yeah, I guess this is assigned to me, and also like the GCP was going to be the first one to migrate to the general reconciler pattern.
Okay.
So probably I'll take over this right after KubeBuilder 2 thing.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so if you want to just take a quick look at that and drop in any changes that you would like, then we can just review it tomorrow real quick.
Mm-hmm. So I will make changes on this issue, or like am I going to create like sub-issues, like specific tasks?
Yeah, so what I would propose is that to start, we just make the changes here, and then we review them really quick as a team, and then if we're all good with that, then we can break out the sub-issues and then go from there, and then you would be the one breaking those sub-issues out and writing them up, and then we could meet back and review those as a team.
Cool.
So one thing I wanted to bring up here is that so we have kind of the three different epics for Azure, AWS, and GCP. And I just want to kind of note that that's a little bit of, in terms of responsibility, like division of responsibility, that's a little bit of a change from we've kind of been like MoveOffic working on the managed reconciler, that spreads across these three providers. I've been working on strongly typed resource classes, et cetera. And so now we're kind of moving into more of a provider division of responsibility. So I'm wondering, just in relation to like the epic regarding resource classes validated and annotated, and this can just be something I do if we want, for each of the infrastructure stacks, that's sort of related to like the managed reconciler and that following a consistent pattern and that sort of thing. So in some ways, really just with the strongly typed resource classes, because the default reconcilers will live in the core because they're with the claims. But I just kind of wanted to point out that that's going to be something that kind of like spans across each of these three provider.
So are you saying like this this sub feature or this sub issue, basically like we're going to have that across all three, and that might be something that you'd be interested in tackling?
Well, I was more saying that there's just a couple of things. So the managed reconciler is pointed out in the Azure, GCP, and AWS epics. Right. And so, and there's not like a separate epic for, you know, use the managed reconciler across providers. And then, but for like strongly typed resource classes, or the resource classes can be validated and annotated, we have an epic specifically for that, but it's also going to be something that falls on these three providers specific epics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think that once we get these split out and the initial implementation done, that we probably will have like cross-cutting concerns that get factored into separate epics. I wouldn't look at kind of having this division of like living in these separate providers with like one person in each, kind of the long-term pattern. I think that for 0.3, it's just that we want to make parallel progress on each of those fronts. But then as we add more capabilities in, it's likely to have the capability and then add this to GCP and AWS and Azure, and then go with that, especially for new functionality. But then also when you know, we have more infrastructure stacks that aren't something that we're actively maintaining. You know, there's also going to be the pattern of us adding new functionality, getting it into a handful of infrastructure stacks, and then having that basically see the capability and validate it, and then that can then be adopted by other infrastructure stack providers. So yeah, we're going to need to work through like how to make that, you know, like a frictionless flow or whatever, but yeah, we'll get there. Good point. Any other closing comments on the GCP one? Sounds like move off if you've got that, and then we can circle back tomorrow with any changes. So for AWS, so it's very similar to the other one, which is with the names changed to protect the innocent, you know, so EKS cluster RDS instance. We're going to need to get the like Elasticache, you know, in here as well. And so that's in the title, and then the buckets as well. And so whoever ends up owning this one should probably go and update what it looks like when we're done to include the additional secure connectivity for those two things. And we're really just going after kind of one secure connectivity model for the 0.3 timeframes. When we talk about single region secure connectivity, like as an example, on like, you know, GCP, you know, you have kind of two options. You have like private IPs, and then you have like the Cloud SQL proxy. So there's actually like two different ways of providing secure connectivity within you know, GCP. And so we're saying we're just going to go with one of them. We're going with the private IPs approach in this time frame, and then we'll add different secure connectivity strategies that could be plumbed in at a later point. So we're not trying to do all the possible ways of connecting. We're trying to say this is a fairly common one. It's well understood. It works cleanly. And so in the case of AWS, you know, that looks like typically like VPC peering and setting up like, you know, subnet and security groups that map to the availability zones, you know, that are in the region that you're deploying to. And so you just create this consistent configuration, you know, for a given target environment that has like an EKS cluster and this on this network. And then you have the networks that like your RDS instances are being plumbed into. And then there's the subnet groups that are defined for that. And then in the resource class for, you know, like the RDS, you basically say use, you know, put it into this VPC and then, you know, use these subnet groups, use these security groups, and then, you know, basically establish VPC peering between those two VPCs so that there's access. So that's kind of just, you know, one single secure connectivity strategy is what we're after here. So who's likely to pick this one up?
I think it's assigned to me. And I'm actually fine. I actually like this because it kind of like matches my expertise with AWS. So what you're saying, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So I mean, Nick did a really great job, kind of bulleting out again, you know, kind of the demo. I think that we're going to want to update the demo to include, you know, like the Elasticache and the buckets as well. And then as far as the contents down here, I didn't put the dependency like I did from the GCP one, but that exists there as well. So if you want to take Java to pass it, you know, cleaning up these bullets of sub issues, and we can review that tomorrow. But does this look reasonable? Any comments, changes, suggestions?
It is reasonable for me. I'm just wondering, what is blocking me to actually start working on this? What are the things which are not done here yet for me to be able to work on this?
Yeah, so basically all of these things, right? So there's to start adding the AWS secure connectivity to the design doc. So Nick had written that up. And then there's a section like we were talking about earlier for the AWS. And so it'd be going and looking at this, doing the research on how we're going to provide secure connectivity in single region with a single secure connectivity strategy in the 0.3 release and kind of define that here. And then basically start defining the actual networking types and controllers for, you know, VPCs, subnets, all the things that you will need to basically define the complete environment from within Crossplane. So it's not expected that, so basically you go to Crossplane, you set it up with your cloud security credentials, and then you can just start creating managed resources without claims or classes for all of the underlying environmental constructs. So basically that would be like setting up the VPCs, setting up the subnets. And then you could do like an EKS claim class for, you know, configuring that, deploying it, using those VPCs and subnets. And then similarly, when you're configuring the RDS class, you know, using one of the VPCs from that, and then saying allowed networks are, you know, the cluster networks, so that, you know, it establishes networking connectivity between the instances provisioned there. And so basically getting the networking and types and controllers in place. And then this basically is just moving to the general managed reconciler. So there's flexibility in terms of exactly when that's done. Maybe you want to do that first. Maybe this one comes first, totally up to you. But ultimately, when we're done, we want to be able to validate that the portable WordPress stack can be deployed, you know, onto a configured environment using the AWS infrastructure stack.
Okay. And then my understanding is this single region connectivity network stuff and stuff like setting those things up are completely new. It's not been addressed yet. And what we have in Crossplane core source code base. Is that correct? So, because I know we do have a few stuff defined, resource classes defined for AWS. I guess my question is the single region connectivity stuff related to that are not yet implemented. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Javad. There's been you know, no networking support in the code base so far. There was I don't know if it's linked here or not, but it's linked somewhere recently or in this topic here. But Luke had done a pull request on some AWS stuff that captured, I think, subnets. There we go. There it is right there. So that would be a starting point. It's not in the code base. It was closed and it was never merged, but this could be at least some relevant work here.
Sure. And then also so that I understand correctly, the scope of this epic or issue are two things. One is like making it as a stack as we're talking, and also making it like a single region secure connectivity possible.
Yeah, so the stack will actually be created in this previous step. So when we look at moving infrastructure stacks into separate repos and upgrade to Builder 2, that's a dependency or predecessor, I guess. And so if we go and look at this, that will include upgraded to KubeBuilder v2, new repo created, and then an infrastructure stack per cloud will be available to be installed in Crossplane. So that means that it's going to be packaged into a stack here, and then also the initial version of that published to the registry. And so then like all the build stuff should be handled as part of this one and all that kind of thing. And so do we know who's taking this right now? Is it, I mean, Muvafik, you're taking the KubeBuilder 2 aspect, but are you taking all of this?
No, it was expected that like at least the first repository, with all the controllers and the metadata and the packaging, et cetera, would be put in place by the Stacks team, so that that pattern is established there at least. Okay. And then, other people focusing on each provider can follow that pattern.
Okay, so you and Muvafik will then collaborate on this one, and Muvafik's taking 502.
Yeah, that sounds correct.
Okay, cool.
And then,
go ahead,
and as far as that goes, would that be okay if I can like experiment how that single regions connectivity works, not using whatever we have currently, and then ignoring this stack transformation first for a bit?
Yeah, I think that actually may be one of the ways that we can parallelize things here. Like you can, try out the new like networking CRDs and controllers, et cetera, for them. And because that would be just like any other controller that needs to be ported or moved out, et cetera. It's all part of the same thing. So I think that we can do some parallel, you know what I'm saying? Concurrency on that one.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is like this stacking thing is just more about scaffolding and using KubeBuilder v2, and then moving the resource classes out of the core Crossplane because of the scalable issues. Are there any other technical kind of like goals off of the stacks that we are following?
I mean, a huge one is being able to set up each provider for ownership of it themselves. Like that's, one of the biggest goals of having them in a separate repo, so that we can have, GCP or DigitalOcean or whoever, completely own that code base and drive it and, have it, a nice separate, clean isolation there. That's one of the huge reasons for doing it.
Okay. Makes sense.
Cool. Okay, yeah, so if you have any tweaks to 6.16 there, Javad, if you could do that by tomorrow, and then we could just do a review in the grooming. And then we're trying to basically get ready for sprint planning on Monday. So basically then breaking out the first one or two features or, sub issues and getting that kind of reviewed. So if y'all want to take a crack at doing the sub issues for that for the first couple ones, so we have that on deck for sprint planning, like that would be a fine thing to do as well. And for the sub features, we're kind of looking to follow a similar pattern if possible to the template that Nick had created in terms of with his, what we're calling phraseology, his awesome phraseology.
What's the word?
So basically it's like, why are we even doing this? What problem are we solving? What does it look like when we're done? How can we demo this functionality? And then anything that's related.
Yeah, what was the logi that you used?
Oh, yeah, it's just basically like, phraseology.
Phraseology, okay.
A word that Jared and I made up yesterday.
Oh no, you can take 100% credit for that, Phil. I won't try to steal your thunder on that one.
Yeah, it was fun. So yeah, so just kind of try and follow a similar pattern if that works for y'all. So the Azure Stack. So we're thinking that while it's possible that we get to the secure networking, we felt like it was too much to do with the strongly typed resource classes and everything else. that were kind of going on. And so we were saying, we can get to the new controller pattern, but no secure connectivity yet. That would likely come like in a 0.4 release. And then we're also finding kind of creative ways to make that happen on an accelerated basis. So very similar to what you saw for the other two without the secure connectivity. And so I think that what we need to do is to clean this up a little bit, to remove this stuff from the demo script and just make it work kind of as it does today with the general reconciler, and then making sure that the portable WordPress stack can deploy to it without the secure connectivity. So who would be likely to pick this one up?
So I think I'm assigned to it. Just to kind of, so what is the difference between GCP and AWS that makes us hesitant to make a goal of secure connectivity in Azure as well?
We just felt like there wasn't time. If it's something that we can do fairly quickly, I think that would be like a fine thing to add in. But I don't know, Jared, do you have any?
Oh yeah, I think a big driver here too. When we're planning this milestone and looking at all the work that we needed to do, there was a whole bunch of stuff there. So we were looking for places where we could scope appropriately. In Azure specifically, made sense to scope out the connectivity stuff because GitLab doesn't really support Azure yet, so it was a lower priority than AWS and GCP were. So that's where that cut came from. The way this team is going so far, if you all do all this stuff and looking for more work, then updating Azure to have network resource modeling and secure connectivity and stuff would be amazing. That would be awesome to have it in there. There's no reason really not to do it except for trying to scope.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I would say that I feel pretty good, especially with the other providers modeling it as well, that we can get that done. So potentially like a stretch goal for this or something like that. But yeah, I'm happy to take this one, and it'll probably be good. I probably have, well, I don't know. Most people don't have a lot of Azure experience, so it might be good for me to have this one anyway.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Dan, if you need any help with that, because Azure is kind of weird. I have a whole lot of Azure experience from the beginning. I used to kind of own all the Azure controllers. And there's some quirkiness to good old Microsoft over there.
Yeah, I remember when I was doing the resource classes for Azure.
That's right. That was the resource group thing. That was your first PR, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. All right, my first actual functionality PR.
Nice.
Very cool.
How far you've grown since then? You're so mature now.
Oh yes, 6 months.
In Crossplane years.
Yeah, no kidding.
I was looking at Dan's profile. If you look at the activity, the whole board of last 12 months for Dan is completely dark green. So he's been very active on GitHub. And I was comparing it to my own. I was I had one green, which was yesterday. So it's pretty cool.
I think that speaks more to my lack of social life, but
oh, so I don't have that either. So
fair enough.
Yeah, well, that's great. You're going to be picking this up, and then if you want to add that in as an aspire or stretch goal or whatever, that'd be great to add that in there. And then if you want to then tweak these to kind of be more kind of here's the stretch things as well, that would be awesome. And then if we're going to need the features broken out, the sub issues created before sprint planning on Monday, or if you have enough with the strongly typed. We're just trying to make sure that there's at least 2 or 3 issues for each person that's that we can basically walk through really quick and just do a quick sanity check on as a team to make sure we're kind of all lined up, and then we can just rock and roll and sprint planning on Monday.
So I have a question on issues. It should be a quick one. What is your fail? Your kind of definition of epic issue, sub issue? Is there a well-known terminology there? I'm a little bit confused there.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of modeling these as like epics and features so that each, related issue here is kind of more at the feature level, or something that, is like demoable. It's like higher level. So it wouldn't, we're trying to stay away from getting the GitHub issues really like cluttered up with a lot of like these super low level tasks that, you might have. And so in the feature, sub issue, there's a really nice feature of the GitHub issues where you can just make like a checklist. And so that's like one option, but it's pretty much however you all want to do that, inside of the features. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. I was also wondering, are we using something called epic? And if we are, is it expressed as like GitHub issues or something else?
Yeah, so it just
a label
as an epic, and then there's a label for if it's broadly in the services category or if it's in the stacks category. So we'll have a similar thing for like feature, and so each of these things should be marked as like feature, and then we can very easily kind of get a filtered list, based on that.
Yeah, I remember in JIRA, you had like all these different types of like issue was just a type, and then bug was another type. But here we're using labels. That makes sense.
Yeah, GitHub is very slim in terms of its functionality compared to more enterprise-focused tools like JIRA. So pretty much with GitHub, everything is an issue. And so if you want any sort of classification or categorization, labels is the pretty common way to do that in a lot of open source projects.
I actually like this one better. Like too much complexity. I never.
Yeah. I don't know a lot of people that are like, I love JIRA and every decision they make and the way that they present things. I like being confused.
No one.
That's never. That wasn't anything they said in my past job. Like love JIRA. I was always complaining.
Yep. Very common.
Well, I think we're pretty close to being done here. This infrastructure stack developer guide is something that Nick is going to be tackling when he's back, but that might also be a team effort. So we can put that on hold for now. And then this one is being done out of the stacks team, and so it's kind of the green label for the stacks. So it's like a stacks epic. And so we can skip that one. We're going to be doing that in the backlog grooming for the stacks folks. And then refreshing the doc is kind of a shared epic, where we'll probably have content there, from across the teams. But one thing that we're saying is that as far as what we're doing, it's mainly like a verifying everything has been updated, and it's basically also saying that the doc should be updated separately as part of this as normal work, as part of like whether it's the GCP stack or the AWS stack, whether it's like going through and doing like strongly typed classes. So when we look at the strongly typed classes, there's work in there for like updating the examples and updating the docs. So if we come to the 613. Sorry for jumping around there. And then we go and look at this content. It's updating all existing examples to use generic resource classes and using generic resource classes to use strongly typed resource classes, and then also update the user guide and docs. So if you don't have stories for that type of thing in your epics, that would be like a great thing to add. And then when we go back to this documentation, it's really just kind of looking at the overall docs for the Crossplane org, for crossplane.io, getting the roadmap updated, getting the README for the main repo updated, updating the architecture diagram, that type of thing. And one of the key things that we're looking to get done early here is to get a consistent glossary and concepts doc published that kind of enumerates all the terms and what they mean, so that we can kind of use a consistent, ubiquitous language and whatnot. So we have a start to that. I think we probably move that to like a public markdown file, and that would be something that we probably start working on right away. Cool. All right. Any closing comments or things before we break for?
I was just going to say this looks awesome. thank you, Phil, for like putting this together. This looks really good. Makes me feel very, very good about this.
Right on. Yeah, thanks. Well, it was a team effort. You know, everybody's kind of contributed to this, and both Nick and Jared were, you know, like prolific epic writers, and so we were just kind of having a good collaboration there. So yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, I'm really happy with, you know, we have a pretty well defined and scoped a set of work items for this milestone here. And, you know, we have a good vision of the milestones, subsequent milestones after that, like 0.4 and 0.5. Those need to be further refined, obviously. But I think it's pretty clear what we're working on for like all of August, basically. So I really like that, but, you know, I think we're all kind of feeling too that, you know, it would be great to do a retrospective and kind of refine that process further, make it more efficient. Like, how do we get to this level of scoped, defined work items and functionality faster the next time?
Definitely.
But we're in a good spot right now.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye bye.